Hello and welcome to the Discover History YouTube channel and our second video celebrating Armed Forces Week. Now, in our military themed videos we've covered quite a lot of topics. We've covered weaponry, armour, we've even covered the military salute. Now, there is one thing though that all these armies that we've talked about couldn't march or do anything without, and that is their rations. An army, an air force and a navy marches, flies and sails on its stomach. Now, rations throughout military history is a massive, huge topic, so we're going to have to narrow it down to one thing. And with it being Armed Forces Week, I'm going to stick to the navy, specifically the navy of Nelson's time. Now, when a ship of Nelson's, a ship of the line, a sloop, a frigate, left port in Nelson's day, it was well stocked with fruit. It was well stocked with vegetables. Well stocked with fresh water. Now, considering the cruisers and that these ships are making, which could last weeks, even months, this fresh food not going to last that long, not until they get to the next port and restock. So when all this fresh food had gone, either eaten it all or it had gone off because it didn't last that long, they would have to fall back on preserved foods, which there was a huge stock on these ships. They had things such as dried peas, cheese, salted fish, salted pork or beef, bread, which most sailors got like a pound a day, or the humble ship's biscuit. Now, bread's not going to last very long, so ship's biscuits were more than common other than bread. Now, to cook this food, you had a cook on board, of course, usually one-legged, because it's usually a disabled sailor. That's the only role he can do on board, is cook. And he was usually named Slushy. A good nickname for a cook was Slushy. I'll tell you why that is in a couple of minutes. But anyway, so the food. He was a man that prepared the food for the sailors on board. Peas could be really well soaked and made into a soup, like so. There's the peas. Make them into a soup. That is one thing that the sailors didn't mind eating. That was quite tasty. The salted meat, basically, it's stored in barrels and it's stored in brine, so it's wet. You might say dried. The peas are dry food stuffs. The meat itself was classed as a wet food, so it's stored in brine. So to prepare, the cook would take this out and have to steep it in fresh water to try and get rid of most of the salt out of that, and then he'd pop it into a pan, boil it up with water to make some sort of rudimentary stew or whatever. Now, while it was boiling up, and this is where the cook gets his name Slushy, it was very fatty meat, and a lot of grease and fat would rise to the top of the water, like a big scum on top of the water. And what the chef would do, or the cook would do, not a chef, the cook would do is scoop that off, skim that off, and then he'd sell it to the crew, and it's called slush. He'd sell it as slush, and they would put it on their ship's biscuits. The reason was that the butter they bought on ship soon went rancid, almost like straight out of port, it went rancid. Now, of course, this sort of food, eaten a bit differently to how we eat today. They also got, as well as fresh water, which often went slimy and so not drinkable, they got 8 pints of beer a day. But after most of the time through a long cruise, that beer would actually go off as well, so not the nicest thing to drink. So they get the beer. You notice they have a spoon, horn spoon, and a knife. No fork, just a knife, and then off a square wooden plate. Which is where we get the term 4 square meals a day from. Okay. Right. So this diet, especially when all this fresh stuff's gone, is not that nutritious. It's not good long term for a sailor. After eating this food and having no fresh food for quite a while, scurvy would often break out. Now, scurvy is quite a nasty condition. Made your teeth all loose. You made your arms, your joints ache. You've got ulcers. Any sort of old wound you've got would reopen up. Not really good for the body at all. The nutrition that this food's giving the sailors is not good. So yeah, they needed fresh food. Now, scurvy, when it was really not known what caused it, there was a few theories of what caused scurvy. One, it was like an upset in your bloods. One, it was the salt in all this cooked meat that caused it, because they noticed that when sailors were on shore and were eating fresh meat, they didn't get scurvy, or not as much. So they said, well, it must be the fresh meat, because they get it when they're eating the dried salted meat. What they'd forgotten was that when sailors were on shore, they're actually eating vegetables with their meat. Now, scurvy is caused by a deficiency of vitamin C, so fresh fruit and vegetables is what's required to keep scurvy at bay. They didn't know what caused it, but they knew that fresh fruit and especially citrus helped the condition. Not everybody agreed. Even when they realised that having lime or lemon, citrus fruit given to the sailors with their ration of drink, helped, not everybody was convinced. So it didn't become sort of like a rule that everyone had to have it. But yeah, that really helped a lot. It's basically what you need. You need more vitamin C, and you get your vitamin C from your fruit and your vegetables. Now, of course, this sort of food was standard throughout 18th and the early 19th centuries. When canned food came in, when they started canning food, that improved the diet for the sailors no end. Now, I talked about the ship's biscuit. Now, this wasn't just restricted to the Navy, so I'll talk a bit about these. Like I say, I made these earlier on. They're the simplest things to make. Just flour and water, and maybe a little bit of salt added. And then I baked these for half an hour, 3/4 an hour to get them hard. Real ship's biscuits could be baked 2 or 3 times to make them rock hard. They needed to be hard because they needed to last. Basically, when you couldn't have bread on board the ship, this was your next best thing. And stored properly, they would last for years and years. There is a story, because not to do with the Navy, but the American Civil War, when the American Civil War started, because these biscuits were still around then. Everyone's been eating ship's biscuits, and hardtack, they were called, the American Civil War. When they issued hardtack to Union and Confederate soldiers, a lot of them have been stored since the War with Mexico in 1846. So 20 years they'd had ship's biscuits stored. That's how long they'd last. If they were sealed properly and in an airtight container, but most of the time they weren't. And most of these, when the soldiers got them out, because we're given a pound of these a day, were either maggoty, wormy, or wheels in them. Not very nice. I do know that when to get these to soften down, because you had to get them softened. If you remember my chocolate concrete video, where you put your custard, your pink custard on to soften down your chocolate concrete, this is what you do with the ship's biscuit. You can either break it up and stick it in water, or you can drop this into your coffee to really soften it down. And basically, by doing that, all your weevils and stuff would float to the top, and then you could skim them off, and you could eat your biscuit and drink your drink. So yeah, ship's biscuit has been around for a long time. These are made round, because this is like the Royal Navy had round biscuits. By the time you get to the American Civil War, they're square and they're called hardtack. There was a diamond version as well, which was easier to stack and store. But even ship's biscuits haven't died out. Even in the 20th century, in the 21st century, there was biscuit brown that the army had, which was basically a ship's biscuit, because it's easily storable. The German army still has these as standard issue in their ration packs. They call them Panzerplatten, armour plates. They're so heavy. In America, Alaskans buy a lot of shit's biscuits. They're good survival food for up in the wilderness. And I mentioned the American Civil War. There was a company called Bent's that made the hardtack for the Union Army, and it's still going today, and it supplies shit's biscuits, hardtack, to American Civil War reenactors. So it's still going, and Sailor Boy, that's another one. So really, although we're talking about food itself, I was quite interested in the ship's biscuit, the fact that it's lasted so long in history and still going today. I don't think I'd want to eat it because it's a bit plain, but you have to process it basically. You process it with dipping it in your drink to soften it down. You can mix a bit of honey, sugar, once it's all softened down, and make a dessert out of it, a pudding out of it, or even sort of break it all down into a mushy lump and then stick it on a campfire and make like a mushy mess out of it and eat it that way. So I hope that's given you a bit of an idea about the sort of food that was eaten by the Royal Navy, how really not very nice. It isn't very nice, it's very bland. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please give us a like and subscribe, and Paul will be back tomorrow with his second video for Armed Forces Week, so we'll see you then. Bye.